Hi, my name is Jason Leong, and I'm from PocketSmith.
Hello and welcome to the Rask Network. What you're about to hear and see is limited to general financial information only. Please be sure to speak to your financial planner or refer to our financial services guide available at rask.com.au/FSG before acting on the information. Jason, thank you for taking some time to join me on the show.
Thanks for having me on.
It's going to be a wide-ranging chat. We're going to talk about business. We're going to talk about life, culture, teams, personal finance. We're going to talk about everything that you've created and the way you think about so many different aspects of what we tend to cover across multiple podcasts. This conversation, I'm sure, is going to be enlightening for no matter who picks it up. But maybe to get the ball rolling, just to set some context here, can you tell us just from, I guess, where we are today in 2024, tell us a bit about PocketSmith, the business, what you're thinking about, how you describe it to friends or family, who you reach. Just give us the bird's eye view.
So when you use money, you generate a lot of data. And what's really interesting about this data is that it tells you so much about yourself. It describes your passions, your values, and where you're going. And what we are really excited about is the opportunity to let you explore this data so you can learn more about yourself. Mm-hmm. So this is what we do at PocketSmith. We basically put this data in at your fingertips so that you can learn more about yourself, you can make better decisions, and live the life you want.
Mm-hmm. And is the business, obviously Kiwi by nature, coming across the pond, how big is the business? Can you give us a sense of, are you in multiple countries? How many people use the product?
Yep, I think we're closing in on about 300,000 users globally. We're in about 190 countries, and we are a small team. So I'd like to call us a boutique personal finance software company. Mm-hmm. And there's a really good reason for that. I hope we can get to talk a little bit about the origins and the, I guess, the trajectory of our company. But we're small and a close-knit team, and we do service the world from New Zealand.
Yeah, great. So we will get to that because I think that's always interesting when we talk about finance. I think one of the things that I realized early on is that to break down kind of the barriers of like big financial brands of the past, 200 years, as we move forward, we tend to trust individuals that sit behind brands as much as we trust the brand itself. And I think that's because we like to know where the buck stops or why something came into existence, and it helps us create a relationship with it, particularly for finance where trust is so important. Mm-hmm. But as you know, the business owner in me, I've got to just ask a question of like, if you wake up tomorrow, what's the one thing that you would look at for the business to say, okay, things are, it's gaining momentum. Things are working today. What is the thing that you look at?
If I wake up tomorrow.
When? We should do when.
So PocketSmith is all about good habits. And I like to think that what I do reflects what we want our customers to do. So if you're looking in on your finances, it's about checking on your balances, making sure that your bills are paid, and that you're comfortable, you've got peace of mind. So what gives me peace of mind, really, I think there are three key things. The first one is our Net Promoter Score. And that's a number that companies look at when they poll their customers to understand how happy they are. And we're polling 75, and that's pretty good in the industry. Yep. The second thing I look at is to see if we're tracking along our growth and revenue forecasts. Mm-hmm. And that makes sure that we're on track. And this is something we've got to make sure that we keep an eye on really on a daily basis. And the third one would be just checking in with my leadership team on how the team is doing. And a lot of the time it's just like catching up with family, really, just to see how people are doing in different quarters of the company and if there's anything that we need to help with or talk to people about.
Now, 300,000 people globally, that's a number that I think I hear that you say that and I'm like, wow. And not necessarily just because you've built something that can handle 300,000 people using it, but more so because of the impact that you have on people and what that means for what the legacy, what you've created and so on and so forth. but I know it doesn't start that way. You don't wake up tomorrow and you've got 300,000 users from an idea you just come up with. So can you take us back to what happened when you started the business? Where were you and the team? Like, what was your background that led you to identify the problem?
It's a big question. The origin story is always an interesting one. PocketSmith began with a question, and it's, can I afford to do the things that I want to do? And I would have been in my mid-20s. I just bought a house. My finances had just gotten a little bit more complicated, but I still wanted to do things like travel, see my friends and family. And I realized that I needed to effectively have a cash forecast. Without wanting to use a spreadsheet, I looked at the calendar and realized that I would work best with my money if I could look at every single day and know going into the future how much I was meant to have. So I'd be able to figure out if I could afford the trip, but also if I could come back and still be okay. So I, being a software engineer, I decided to start writing some scripts to bolt this into my old ical at this point. And this is, it would have been 2005. It's a long time ago. And as I was doing this, I realized that, hey, what I'm trying to do here is to address the fear of the unknown. And not knowing how much I'm going to have in the future is a lot like crossing the road blindfolded. You're really taking a shot here. And that a lot of tools really helped you look at your historical data and your historical performance, but not really where you're going to be going forward. So that was the genesis of the idea. And as a company, we've grown slowly. We've had the benefit of time. So we're 16 years old this year. And we've chosen to stay the size that we have for a number of reasons. We've not raised capital. We've built our company brick by brick in order to have a meaningful place to work and to ensure that we keep our culture and our principles and our values close at heart. And you're right, like 300K people signing up for accounts doesn't happen overnight. And it's been lovely. It's hard to imagine, serving that many people right off the bat. And it's a really good thing, really, that we're not, because personal finance is a very complex area. And we can't imagine to understand all of the problems we need to solve out there, but that still remains our mission.
I love that. I feel like there's so much, earned advantage in 16 years of like the knowledge that you've accumulated, the trials and tribulations, the failures and successes. A lot of people only see the successes and they think, I'll just replicate that, I'll do that. So once you wrote that, did you say an ical? Is that like, what's that? Is that like a calendar?
Yeah, ical is, I don't think it's called ical anymore, but this is when, on your Mac, I see you're using a Mac. So the calendar app for your Mac used to be called ical. The idea was if I could see my events in here, I should be able to see my money in here as well. So that feature is still a big part of PocketSmith. It's well loved. And it's what people use to actually schedule their bills and make sure that they can see basically every single day going forward up to 60 years where you're meant to be, which could scare some people, but really it just lets you know where, whether or not you're on track.
Yeah. So once you build that initial prototype, MVP, whatever you want to call it, you built that for yourself, right?
Yes.
Then what was the next step? Did you give it to family or friends, or did someone come to you and be like, oh, that's kind of cool?
Yeah. I was very lucky to have buddies who really enjoyed the idea of building something. And I like to tell people that we didn't set out to build a personal finance product. We're a company of makers, and we love building something meaningful that could have positive change for anyone, anywhere. We're still today very excited about the internet giving us the potential to connect with people globally. And that is really at the heart of why we love our job. Finance is just the subject matter, but we make stuff for people. And so we set out to rebuild this thing in a web app, a product that we could put on the internet so everyone could use. And we were quite fast about it. Within 4 weeks, we had an alpha version out there. We encourage friends and family to use it. And, they're usually not the best barometers of whether or not a product's really good. Like mom was like, yeah, it's wonderful. Like, keep going. But really, they're not the target market. But obviously we were just having fun, putting this out there. One of the most critical bits of feedback that we got was that, this could be really handy, but we'd really love to have our actual transactions in here, our actual data. And while we were scoping this product to be quite opinionated, which means that we didn't want to have too many features bolted onto it. We wanted it to be simple. We very quickly learned that personal finance isn't a one-size-fits-all problem to solve. You can't have a simple tool that addresses the depth and diversity of how amazing people's financial lives are. And we started listening to customers and understanding what they wanted to solve and building the product out. So it wouldn't be until a year down the line that we would finally have something ready for prime time. And we funded it ourselves, and we are still a self-funding company. So it took us a while to get to that point, but that journey still continues.
Yeah, wow. So we will come to this in a moment, because there are so many companies that have tried to do what you're doing. I think that's an important story in itself. And also the bootstrapping, the idea of not having venture capital money in a business is a big decision to make. But there was something that I read on your About Us page, and it was more like a subheading or a headline or something. And it's basically PocketSmith celebrates individuality. And I wanted to know what that meant to you, because I'm told that's like a big part of what you think about is the team. Obviously your role as a leader in the business, but more so than most. So what does that mean to you?
It means that we're a people-focused business. We're focused on our customers, and we're focused on our team. And the individuality we celebrate here is just the sheer diversity, again, of thought, diversity of life that we see in our customer base. And that gratitude that we have to be able to connect with someone right across the world and help them out, that doesn't get old. And diversity within the team is equally important for us to be able to serve that customer base. So we celebrate diversity by, I guess, being open-minded, being accepting of people's situations. We're not judgmental. We often say that we've built a product for you to be productive with your money, to live the life you want. But we're not going to tell you how specifically you ought to do this. There are advisors out there who can help you with it, but we will give you the tools. So within our team, and I'm just amazed and inspired by the people that we have. And I'm not just saying this because I'm their CEO. It truly gives me so much joy coming to work every day. We have smart, creative people who have very vibrant lives outside of our workplace. And that colors our environment, and it gives us that ability to relate to people, which is very important.
And so a natural question that I had in follow-on to this one was like, how has your individuality or like your personal background or values influenced the company?
I'd say it'd be my parents. My dad was a banker and my mom was a math teacher. So naturally,
there you go.
I had no interest in banking or math at all. But the irony is, of course, that we do this at a very deep level today in our business, and we do it very well. Mom taught me to be prudent with money. But dad, he was a banker with HSBC and a remarkable turnaround agent. And, as a kid, I didn't really pay a lot of attention to the work that he did. I kind of found it boring. But as I grew older, I started to understand that the stories that he brought home were about people. They weren't about the numbers. They weren't about finance, but they were about the lives changed through what the bank could do for them. And he was a remarkable turnaround agent because they would send him into these lowest performing branches, and he would bring them all the way up to the top without losing a single person. And this is because he believed in the power of change that could be affected by people. That sense of being a humanist and that sense of belief in people has, I think, been imbued in me. And it's only something I'm starting to recognize more and more as I get older.
Yeah, I really like that in terms of how you can recognize that from your parents, because we're doing grain, like that comes with us, right? As the nurture versus nature debate unfolds. A lot of the time when I speak to people and I hear stories about either the way they invest money or the businesses that they've built, you can often trace things back in time. And even if it's like sometimes even on the podcast, I don't realize until they come in, it's like a therapy session. You're like, here you were then and here you are now kind of thing. And it's great.
I notice you don't have a box of tissues here.
No, nothing like that. There's no, I think I've got an ink plot somewhere where I can show you some shapes. We'll do that afterwards. But in terms of like, if we do sit back and we think about building a business, and a lot of companies have great values and they print them up and put them on the wall or whatever.
Yeah.
How does it actually take shape at PocketSmith? Like if someone's listening to this and like, okay, that's great. What would someone see at PocketSmith? Maybe that something that they don't see somewhere else. Is there anything, like any examples you can give us?
A very good question. It's an interesting one because I really don't know what these people are seeing everywhere else.
Of course.
I think that they would see a strong sense of trust and psychological safety in amongst the team, that it's okay to be brave and to question things, and that there isn't a hesitation. I'm not saying that this happened right out of the gate. Our values are not the 10 Commandments. We haven't sort of hammered them into stone and I can't grow a beard, but I could put a fake one on. And we don't push them onto the team. They've been derived from the team. And the reason we could do this is, again, part of that managed growth. When we were 2, 3, then 4, 5 people, at some point we said, okay, well, what are these values we hold dear, and how do we codify them in order to hire more like-minded people? And we often take a step back and check to make sure that we're living by our values. And so what I'd like to tell you is that if someone were to look at us, they'd see a bunch of people who really, really dig each other, really enjoy working together. There's a strong sense of trust. And it's a part of really, it makes my day, every day coming to work.
I can sense that just from chatting with Dora, who's off air here, not shown on the camera, and you guys have come across to Australia, and just chatting with the team, I get a sense that it's just everyone seems to get along so well, which is actually very rare, particularly in finance. I often find, honestly, you would probably know this better than me, but you see a lot of people and they put on a good face for meetings and these types of things. But genuine connection and like genuinely getting each other and understanding each other is a totally different thing. And that's really, really lovely to see. I guess one of the questions I wanted to ask you is about like building this business over such a long time. Do you look to other businesses for inspiration, whether that's on the tech side, whether that's on the culture side, whether it's on the ambition? Could be like locally grown business from Oz, overseas. Anything in particular that jumps out to you?
I wish I did. But no, in fact, I would say I'm a relative recluse when it comes to modeling our shop after a different place. The reason being, I'm not huge on social media to start with. I feel that we've got enough on our plates to focus on a day-to-day basis. So I guess it really is an internal compass. I'm sure there's some wonderful companies out there with some incredible values, but it's quite difficult to draw a line between what we have and whether or not what someone else has done has been a good match for us. And the reason for this is it goes back to what you're saying about finance, companies in finance, people working in finance, where none of us are from the financial services industry. We're software people. We're makers. We are empathetic people who support other people. And again, our product just happens to be an awesome financial tool. And it is tough. I guess it can feel a little bit lonely sometimes because New Zealand has a very strong track record for SaaS companies, but primarily B2B SaaS companies. And there is a sort of a playbook for how you grow a SaaS company, from a remote place like New Zealand, and we do it very well. The challenge is we're a B2C SaaS company. Not only that, we're consumer focused in finance. And there are few enough of those in the world, I guess, particularly those that are like us, producing a pure SaaS play. So we don't offer a free version and cross-sell you products. And so we are very much not fashionable. And I guess it was a good question because I guess I've not really thought about why we don't really have a sibling or a company that we look to. That's probably why we might be quite unique, not because we want to be, but just because of the space that we play in and where we play it from.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I often think a lot of business owners spend too long looking at the competition and not enough looking at their customer.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah. But obviously, like one of the great success stories, which I was very happy to own shares in for a long time, was Xero, which is B2B, selling accounting software to accountants.
Yes.
And a wonderful story. If PocketSmith gets big enough in Australia, we're going to claim you to be Australian. That's how it works,
That's
right?
absolutely fine.
Yeah. That's
we would be proud to be claimed as Australian.
That's the way it works with great software companies. We can't remember exactly. It must be Australian.
You've got to be stoked when Xero listed on the ESX.
That's it. That's it, right?
It's ours.
That's it. It's ours now. I have to think that the way that you might build something is actually it's quite intentional, even if it's unintentional. So like the fact that you don't use social media, for example, where social media creates an echo chamber of what you should or shouldn't do. I recently had a cleanse or a detox from social media, and I've got to admit, like it's been a very, very welcome change. And I've got more time to read. Like normally I would consume a lot of books, and I realized all I had time for this year was audiobooks.
Right.
And I listened to the same book four times already. But I think the thing is, like, I wouldn't have done that because it was consumed by this like vortex of social media, and I've given that away, and I've got so much time and clarity. Why did you avoid, or why do you not avoid? Maybe it's not a thing that you do actively, but why don't you engage?
I was really enamored of Twitter and Facebook when they came out. God, what are we looking at here? 2002, 3, perhaps?
2000. I think Facebook 2004. I don't know when Twitter was, but I know why it was 140 characters because it was built on the
SMS platforms. Yeah, that's right. So yes, again, when we all got onto Facebook, it was all about connecting with your closer friends. And in fact, years and years ago, back in the early 2000s, it would have been 2001 actually, I built what I called then a collaborative blog that was available to just my close friends. And it was just a way for me to practice building software. And you could post, effectively it was something quite Facebook-esque, even down to the chat. And what I really enjoyed about it was being able to see what we saw in the early days of social media. How are my friends doing? But then as your networks grow to 1,000, 2,000 people on your feed, and Facebook starts to bring in other things like news and recommendations, I find it harder to moderate how I'm feeling because I have not invited these things into my life. I place a high value on having peace of mind. And I admit I'm probably quite a distractible person. And I'm also a highly empathetic person. And so when you throw all of that into the mix, social media is a bit of it can churn me up inside for a range of reasons. I'd feel really happy for someone. I'd feel devastated for somebody else. But it wasn't by my own doing. Just by opening that stream, I have given my emotions, I've given something else reign over my emotions. So to your point, having the space to actually think about what it is that I want to do and how I want to allocate my time, that's been tremendously freeing. And similarly, I don't really get that sort of endorphin blast from posting something and seeking validation. I don't look for that either. So I guess I've just gone back to the days before social. I mean, I still have my social media accounts, and I still use them to keep in touch with my friends if I have to. But I'm so happy not opening those apps.
It's. I didn't think our conversation would go to social media, but I'm glad it did, because the sentiment that you have right there is something that I am very much thinking about now. When I used to really engage on Twitter, it was all about connecting with people who shared similar values in investing and these types of things. But lately what I've found is that it's more in your face. There's a lot of changes, and I think it's actually going in a very, when I say bad way, I think it's bad for the business itself. I think the platform itself is becoming much less, I guess, not curated, because you don't want to have an echo chamber of your own thoughts necessarily, but I don't think it's becoming nearly as useful as it once was. So that's why I've kind of switched off that. But it's really interesting because it does bring you clarity of thought when you can kind of be distant. But also, interestingly enough, like the whole idea of bootstrapping a business, if you were like in the ecosystem of Twitter, you probably would have been like, well, everyone's doing it. I should probably do that too. I did have a question, which I'm hoping to jump to.
Oh, just before that, I thought, I'd like to add that I've read something recently that echoes what you were saying about the sheer velocity of opinions that come through Twitter. Yeah. And this thing that made a lot of sense to me was around how the internet used to be. Like people seem really outraged now all of the time. And it may seem that we may have less empathy for each other's opinions, or that, how could someone have such a radical perspective on something? And in this book, and I wish I could remember the title, I'm so sorry, but they talked about how communities used to be a lot smaller. And you would have maybe a forum where you would chat about other things alongside this topic that you were there for. And you got to know the people who were having that conversation with you. And as humans, we're bred to live in communities and empathize with them, probably as a sense of, from a sense of survival. It's a biological need for us to rely on each other. Social media has evolved to the point where it's a fire hose of opinions from a ton of people that most of them you don't even know. And I think that really is a powder keg for a lot of bad things. So I really do think it may sound like I'm sort of turning away from communicating with people, but it really is the lesser of two evils. I think, yes, the internet is still a wonderful place to connect with people who can share your opinions or to challenge you, but it's hard to put a leash on it when it's as big a pipe of opinions as the likes of most social media platforms today.
I'm really glad you said that. We had someone on the show by the name of ical, and Nir spent a lot of time helping to craft the engineering.
Is he the author of
Individuality? Yes. Yes.
Fantastic. I need to listen to that. I did read that book and it did come out. I was quite inspired by it, but it was all about using patterns to keep people engaged.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that inspired like the Netflix documentary, I think it was, and then all of this sort of stuff. But then he came back and he wrote another book called Indistractable. And he came on the show and he talked about this, how he tried to convince everyone how to rewire their brain so that they weren't hooked all the time. And so he's kind of given you the poison, and then he's given you the antidote. But he's a wonderful person.
Good on him.
And it's great. And it was an illustration of how you need to be indistractable, particularly if you want to achieve goals, these types of things. You need to figure out a way to keep yourself focused.
Yes. I look at Hooked quite differently today as I did back then. And he does as well, obviously, because who could have thought that the internet would become what it is today? Not good or bad. It's just what it is. But we can't put that genie back in the bottle anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so one final question on the team side of things, which is that how do you think businesses thrive when they're distributed, or like they're remote teams, quote unquote?
Yes, I'm going to go back to us having the benefit of time in creating a really good remote work culture. We're remote first, even though we've got offices and people live in the same city. And there are three things I think we can learn from our experience. The first is for the leaders of the companies to to be remote. The second really lies in communication, your ability to empathize well with people, and to lay, I guess, some ground rules for what it means to be asynchronous, and to not be stressed. For example, if you're on something like Slack, to feel the pressure to respond quite quickly. There was a third one there, and I'm going to look over at Dora because we had a conversation about this just yesterday. Over-explaining. So respecting your colleagues' time when you're remote is very important. So, Slack is a place where you can just hop on or just say Microsoft Teams or any workplace chat app. You can bleat away and come up with a half-baked idea. But there is the notion of deep work that we need to respect for our teammates. And it's always better to think about what it is that you want to put forward for your colleagues rather than spin it out as you're writing. Because then your colleagues get to look at something and assess it in its entirety and then respond. So there was a time when chat made it seem like, email's outdated. But email was good because it actually forced us to consider what to put down. Whereas chat is like, if you use it like a stream of consciousness, that's very bad for remote work. So there are there are many, many pillars for creating an effective remote team. And I know that it's a topic of conversation right now for many companies that have had to respond quickly to COVID, and now they're bringing people back into the office. I'm not saying it's easy. Even though we were remote from the ground up, we had to learn the lessons along the way around inclusivity and making sure that everyone's being taken along for the ride. And so really it comes back down to just being empathetic to the condition, being connected with your team and understanding what it is that they need, and whether or not our time is being well used.
That first point that you mentioned is the leaders need to be remote. What did you mean by that?
I think it's hard to empathize with someone who's working remotely if you're not remote yourself. And again, I'm not going to tar all companies with the same brush. I think there may be people who do work on premises who completely understand what it means to be remote. But there is a degree of trust and empathy that you can only build if you yourself are working from a home where there may be distractions. So for example, for us, we have we give our employees the space to live their lives while they're at work, while they're at home. So this doesn't mean that we, put cameras up or say that you've got to be at your desk and we're monitoring your keystrokes and that sort of stuff. You're home, it's going to be sunny. You're going to go hang out your laundry. If it's a nice day, you perhaps want to go and have a surf. At 3:00, you might want to pick up your kids up. As our human brains need to process life and the benefits that we get from living and working from home should not be put aside just because we're at a virtual office. On the flip side, we trust that our team knows when to come back and work when they're feeling good and feeling up for it. And we build in systems to track that and to give people a chance to time bank, for example. And I think that it's hard for your leaders of a company to lay down policy for remote workers if they don't really get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all I mean.
Yeah, it's interesting because some of our team is remote. Or like Matt Mullenweg from founder of WordPress and Automatic. Yeah, would say, I prefer the idea of being distributed because it's like a team that's just all over the place. It's not, for me, remote is like middle of the Australian outback. There's like a kangaroo in the red desert just like skipping past. And I think of like loneliness, but that's just me, but I think about that a lot. And I think that one of the challenges that we have is that some of our team love going into the office and some of us like being outside of the office. And so you don't want to have two rules for two different camps, but it almost needs to be because there's almost like, well, you're in the office, so you're going to have these benefits and you're going to be remote, so you're going to have these benefits. But it's just, I guess it's about just a bit of compromise for people's sake. And that's where I thought maybe you were going.
Yeah, well, we have we believe that if you're a hybrid remote company, I think we should be remote first. And so this sort of thinking, just say, extends to little things like if there are 3 of us at the office and 1 person at home, and we're connecting over a meeting over Google Meet, we'll make sure that everyone is on camera and everyone's speaking to the camera. Otherwise, you end up in a situation where 3 people are in a room bantering away and 1 person's unheard. And it was a little bit strange doing that to start with, but now it's just second nature to everyone. So yes, that is a compromise, I suppose, in that you can't you have to open your laptop in a on-premise meeting, but it's absolutely fine. And once you've bitted that in, everyone really enjoys it. Yeah.
In terms of bootstrapping the business, so rather than taking venture capital money, which is very, very common these days, it's almost like you bring in a new master, in my opinion. What consequences has that had, or why did you choose to do that over, say, like I'm sure with the business getting traction, you would have had venture capitalists, I'm assuming, kind of like knocking on the door, being like, hey, you want some money?
Yes.
So like, why didn't you go down that path?
Well, it's exactly as you said. They want your pound of flesh. And what we paid was we paid in time. And fortunately for us, we've had the benefit of being able to grow the business over time. One of the reason for us not taking capital really has changed over the years. At the very start, we weren't entirely sure of what it was we were building. And we couldn't hand on heart go out to an investor and say, hey, this is going to 10x your returns over the next 3 years. And even if it could, what sorts of pressures would you have on the business? And that's really the second stage of thinking. As we continued to grow the business, we realized, we are building something that we want to build here. We know the customers, and we know that we need the time and the space to be able to pull this off ourselves. The independence was really important to us, particularly in building a product that safeguards customers' financial data. One of the challenges of sitting on this responsibility is that if somebody has bought into your company and you're not delivering the sorts of returns that are expected of you, you may be compelled to do something that as a founder of the company, you're not comfortable doing. We don't like to cross-sell financial products to our customers. We believe in a pure SaaS model, which is that our customer pays for the product we build for them and that we deliver value. It's that simple. When you muddy the waters around trying to fund rapid growth with venture capital and then eventually creating a revenue model based on that scale, you run into some very sticky moral decisions to make. And that's not the fault of whomever's funding you. They gave you the money to actually, they're not a charity. And we've seen time and again the number of companies that have, they've folded just because they just weren't, they didn't have the runway, or as we've seen with, post-COVID interest rates rising, capital is drying up, and it's just closed the door on so many companies, right? So we really value the independence. We value the ability to stay close to our values. We value the ability to hand on heart go in front of our customer and say, we built this for you because we believe it's good for you, or that we're responding to you. And we're not compelled by any third party, or as you said, a master, to ship things quicker than we have to, or to do anything that we're not comfortable with.
I was just chatting to Jordan when he was in here before. We recorded an episode, and we were talking about how there are some people in our community who work on innovation boards or work with big funders like endowments and that sort of a thing, and try and support their own VCs. Like, a lot of people don't know that universities can also act like VCs, like incubators, fund the project, commercialize it, sell it, or vice versa, sell it, then it's commercialized. And he was talking to me saying, I don't understand why they just don't support small business, because small business is the country, right? And I kind of tried to make the point that it doesn't make sense for the VC because for them, they put down $500,000 or $1 million and they're looking at a 50x return potential, but they do that 50 times versus trying to write $250,000 checks and potentially getting a 3x return. For them, it doesn't matter. They give you money, they expect you to spend it. And if you don't spend it, they ask questions. And if you don't deliver, well, they don't care because they've got 49 other things that they can move on with. And unfortunately, that seems to be the nature of the beast, in my opinion. And it is what it is. And some businesses need to grow fast because the opportunity is in front of them. So that's something that I would probably throw out there. But if we actually focus in on the product for a second, so like you said, with so many users and so much data that people are pushing in, it's a SaaS model.
Yes. Where
people pay, and a lot of businesses have failed in this marketplace, which we can come to in a second. But I'm more curious about the data and the insights. And having done this for so long, perhaps some of these ideas may have, you've seen them thousands of times, but I'm curious, like as someone who sees this kind of a thing a lot, some of the insights that you've seen from helping people track their finances, like what would those big things that surface often be?
What's heartwarming is that we are all bound by the financial system. I don't know if that's a heartwarming thing or not, but it's when we take a look at what makes us, what the commonalities are between all of our customers in all of the regions across the world. Finances are merely a vehicle by which you get to your life's ambitions, fulfill your dreams, and that sort of a thing. So it doesn't really matter what language you speak or what challenges you're facing. We're all just people just looking to, live the life that we want. In terms of the data, we really put a huge emphasis on safeguarding that data and being custodians of the data rather than leveraging it for any other purposes. And it's a really gray area when it comes to how do we put it? Anonymizing data by region. And we do that sometimes. If it answers your question, please clarify it for me if I've missed the mark. We do have a product at a little app. If you go to PocketSmith.com/spending, it's an aggregate spending map that shows based on different categories, what people are spending in different parts of the world and how this has changed over the last year or so.
Cool.
And it shows, I guess, a progression of how things are moving. And that's a really cool way to, I guess, use our data without being too specific about people's actual spending habits. We don't accidentally dox people because we're very careful to anonymize that information.
I like this. I just brought it up as the first thing that pops up for me is utilities on this global spending map. And you can see how much in Australia, it's gone up 4% year over year. In Canada, it's gone down 7%. These are some really interesting things. So you actually created it so that everyone could have a look and see, what is changing and what is not changing. I wonder, this is the polarizing thing. So I'm going to bring up groceries. Groceries have gone up 3%. I did learn the other day that actually lamb is on the way down. So that's for any of the people that like lamb, that is back on the table. So nice. Well, that's fascinating.
It's cool. It's the idea and the potential to bring that data back to the people. And that is, I guess, probably the evolution of our business. As we get a bit more confident, and we are a small team, as we have a bit more time, it is our passion to make the most of this data in the most meaningful way. And it is not really about profiting off it. We don't think it's right. And again, we don't have to worry too much about that because, again, we're a pure SaaS business. And we're providing a service to the customers because they pay for it. And that keeps us honest because, if you don't like it, you won't pay for it. And it makes sure that we keep our customer service, our product, our marketing, our messaging all in line with the customer firmly in view.
Yeah, a lot of people say that use the platform and track spending, forecast spending, all that sort of stuff, savings goals, you name it. They do say customer service is a massive feature. The ability just to pick up and...
I'm glad you're here.
Yeah. That's what they tell me. Actually, the other thing that they tell me is that the way the product is built, and I wanted to know if this was more like deliberate or not, but the way the product is built is you have to put in a lot of effort up front. So you kind of like go through like this onboarding process, and you have to, I think, I don't know, I kind of think of it as like reconciling things, but was deliberate?
Yes. Well, there are a number of ways of looking at the process. One is that you can make the account, press auto categorize, and boom, it's all categorized for you. The other step you can take is to actually walk through your merchants and categorize them as you go. And that's probably where it takes more time. Both will result in having a breakdown, but I would argue that it is more important for you to decide on the categories that you want for your finances rather than to have the machine do it for you. And the whole point to all of this is to not have your work done for you because you wouldn't learn anything otherwise. It's so important to reflect upon the transactions you've gone through, and it's not a linear thing either, because when as you're looking through your transactions and categorizing them, and we've been told that PocketSmith pairs really well with a Pinot. So sit down with a glass of wine, or if you don't drink, a nice cup of tea.
Yes, I think that's what Mitchell did in our team. I think he had a red wine and he started to sink into it.
So this is what we want to know. How much red wine did he have to get through the process? Your mind goes places as you look at something and it triggers a memory. And the reason why it's important is that if you're looking at, just say you've been to a restaurant, you see the dollar amount. Okay, $250. Good grief, that was expensive. But what did it mean to you? Who did you eat with? Would you go there again? How do you feel about spending $250 on a meal relative to a bunch of gadgets, say, for example? All of these come together to form a picture of who you are and your values. And to not actually take the time is to throw all of that data away, which is effectively throwing away the purpose of using a product like PocketSmith. So yes, there's a fast lane. You can use it, absolutely. You can get from A to Z in a few clicks, but I would really recommend stopping to smell the roses along the way.
So paint the picture for people so they can onboard, say a few clicks, and then from there, it's effectively like reading transactions, categorizing. And so people can check in every week, every month, and check in on their finances, see where things are being spent, get a proper breakdown of things, but then also forecast and think about the future like you were back in the very beginning.
That's right.
Creating something in your calendar, trying to figure out, can I still go overseas?
Yes. So we used to call PocketSmith a time machine for your money, because you could look at all of the transactions and the categorization in your memories in the past. What's currently happening here, your current budgets, are you tracking to what you've set, and what your future looks like? And it's a rolling forecast, so it pegs at your forecast to your balances, so you're always accurate and you have a clear vision of where you're going. And yeah, that really is that is you. And I often think that you don't have too many opportunities to explore things about yourself as you would with your financial data. The closest approximate I can think of is going into an old storeroom and rifling through some old memories, pictures, things. But this data is so fascinating because it really describes your values. And this is why we're so passionate about taking this product to the world and letting people go full explorer on it, on their own finances.
Yeah. I had a friend that moved to LA recently, and I was like, you just got to use PocketSmith.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. This was before I even, this was a whole thing and we were going to catch up and whatever. I was just like, you got to use it. You just got to go check it out. Because it was the only thing that I could think of where I was like, I know people have used this in Australia and you can go and you can use it. So it still works for him.
It does, yeah. And it's great because we do multi-currency. So he can link up. We link up to nearly every bank in the world. So he can pull in his accounts from the States and see those in US dollars. He can still keep track of his accounts in Australia and see those in Aussie dollars. And he can pick a base currency. If he wants to see his net worth and his budgets in USD, because he's living there, he can do that. And then when he comes back, he just flips mode and tracks his Aussie stuff. So It is really the ideal tool for them.
A lot of people in our community use things like ShareSite for like portfolio tracking or Navexa. Does it work with ShareSite?
Yes. Yeah, we've got a direct integration with ShareSite.
Okay.
It's a lovely story there because their customers wanted a cash tracker. And so they said to ShareSite, hey, would you build us a simple cash tracker? And ShareSite would have said, it's not that simple. And our customers have asked us for a simple portfolio tracker. And we're like, no, that's not that simple either. But this is open banking at play. In between two tech companies, we have an API that lets ShareSite users pull in PocketSmith data and vice versa.
Cool.
And so that's part of the joy of where I think fintechs are going, is your ability to share your data in the platform that you're most comfortable with and that's most useful to you.
Yeah, which puts you at a significant advantage because you're capturing arguably the single most important piece of data.
We'd like to think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, aside from medical data, but...
Oh, yeah. But at the same time, day to day, most people don't think, like, I'm not sitting here thinking about where my latest blood test results are. I'm like, how could I leverage that, But but I'm thinking about my budget and I'm thinking about my portfolio and how I can get a clear picture and all that type of thing. How about Australia? It's like a big market of like a lot of small businesses, like contractors and sole traders. Does it work with that?
Yes, it could. So micro SMEs are a segment of customers. So we look at our customer profile, overall profile is the home CFO. And that's the person who takes care of the household finances. And within that, we've got the families keeping track of their budgets. We've got investors tracking their net worth. And then we've got contractors who are, they might have irregular income, or they might be billing in different currencies, which is quite common nowadays. And so someone who's running a side hustle, for example, like an Airbnb, would be able to track that and do a whole bunch of management accounting views on their money. I was about to say tricks, but that just sounds like we're encouraging fraud. Not at all. If you're looking at your side hustle through the lens of a general ledger product like Xero or Reckon, you're stuck to some set rules. The nice thing about PocketSmith is that we give you so many different ways to look at your data through a range of different graphs and labeling and categorization and saved searches. You can, say, split off your Airbnb income into a trends graph to show how it's been performing over the last few years, and then take a look at the expenses that go with it. So it's really up to you to figure out what you'd like to pull out of it. And then you can export that stuff into a file and hand it to your accountant. Yeah, so it's not going to run your taxes for you, but it will do pretty much everything else.
Yeah, I love that. I love lessening the admin, to be honest.
Yeah, I read somewhere that it takes an average person about 300 hours a year to manage their household finances. And this could be sifting through the mail to find an old insurance what do you call it? Certificate or whatever it is. Or, like looking up bills or trying to respond to a home loan application by pulling out the necessary data. With PocketSmith, when you put your information in there, everything's at your fingertips. And just, off the back of an envelope, we took a look at engagement times. We could reduce that 300 to 2 because you'd sit down when everything's set up. What did I spend on entertainment or groceries in the last quarter? What about the last year? All these numbers come up straight away, and it saves you a lot of time, and it gives you a sense of comfort to know that. Similarly, we've got a feature where you can upload your files or photos, PDFs, bills, that sort of a thing. So for example, if you've got a project that you're working on your house, just say renovations, all your contractors' bills can be uploaded to the transactions related to the project. And then you can just label all of them as, this is the kitchen renovation 2024. And you can see the sum total of that project and all of the related files and invoices. You can mark them as paid. So it's like Lego. You can choose to do what you want with it. And that's what I absolutely love about the product.
Yeah, that's cool. That has a lot of implications for people that listen to this that have a property or invest in their personal name or project manage things. I was chatting to someone just this morning who is trying to think about the costs of doing a fix-up on their home and how they would track that, and it's already stressful enough.
Right.
There's a couple more questions that I have for you, and I will just direct anyone that if you already use PocketSmith, I'd love to know what you think. So please write into us. I think I've got to do like a live on this. Like I've got to do a video-based thing where I can show people how things work, in addition to this one, of course. But actually show people how this works because it's super powerful. Like if anyone could take away even an hour of my time, it would be a really big thing for me.
A few use cases would be hilarious. So you could challenge PocketSmith to show you some of the things that you want to see.
Yeah, I don't know how much people want to see my finances, but I'll give it a crack. Why do you think, my question was going to be, before I get to some of the things just in closing, why do you think so many tools and the businesses that surround them in this particular genre of finance have failed? Like so many. I feel like I actually do believe that everyone has failed. Except PocketSmith, of course.
Yes. I think it's because companies have fallen in love with the idea of building a business rather than the problem that they're looking to solve for the customer. And it sounds like a very trite thing to say, but let's go all the way back to 1980. No, I've actually written a blog post about this when one of the biggest personal finance tools in the States, Mint.com, closed. And they closed in March. So way back in the 80s, we had tools like Microsoft Money and Quicken, software that you would pay a license fee for, and you install it on a computer and manage your finances. It wasn't that complicated. And then with the boost of these web tools in 2005 or so, we had people turn their thoughts to finance and realize that, hey, look, we could connect to a bunch of banks and give people interpretation of their money, aggregate accounts in one place. And what we will do is go for growth. And so we'll offer it for free. And people will sign up and we will cross-sell them financial products or have something else that's quite smart, and we'll make money out the other end. The problem with this is that number one, we've never gone down that path, as I mentioned earlier, because it's not really our bag. But we've also never been able to make the numbers work. How is it that you're supporting a business by, making these referrals and making enough to not only keep your business afloat, but to make it thrive? But the problem is that the granddaddy of it all, Mint.com, was funded by Intuit, which is a multi-billion-dollar company. And they have other products, the most successful of which would arguably be TurboTax. And that is a paid-for product. And they're basically driving customers to that. But in the meantime, the growth, and I think Mint had tens, if not 100 million customers or users at a point, maybe. I may be wrong, but it was a big, big number. Because of there were, I suppose, a titan in the industry, there were so many other founders that thought, okay, we should also take a punt on this and raise the money to do something quite similar. And it really ends up being a sort of a house of cards. The problem for companies like us, the smaller boutique ones that have built a revenue model around it, is that this sort of activity, for a while there, told people that they weren't interested in paying for personal finance software. And people would say there's a grand irony, for example, in having to pay for software to help me manage my money. There isn't. It's just software. If you find it useful, pay for it. It doesn't matter if it's money or Photoshop or whatever it is, And so to answer your question, I think that that whole period in which people thought that they could monetize of this, it was a grand experiment that didn't quite work out. As capital dries up, it's harder for these companies to survive. And that's probably why we've seen over the last few years a lot of these companies closing down. And I mean, it is a shame because when they closed, a lot of people lost their abilities to use the tools that they liked. But again, it goes back to, if you're not paying for something, you're likely the product. And we've never been a fan of your financial data being taken without your consent to, I don't know even what, to sell you other things or trying to make a buck of you at the other side. You signed up to a product to be better with your money. And really that's the responsibility the company has to you. And so the companies that are still alive today, and we know there are a few of them are boutique. There's some reasonably big ones, but their focus has always been on the customer and solving the problem for the customer. And I guess it's just taken this long for this awareness to really hit the personal finance software sector.
Well, it's great for you, and congratulations for sticking it out.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's like credit to that view, right? It's taken a time, but those businesses are faltering. Intuit, by the way, for the investors in the room, is a wonderful business in terms of the stock price and in terms of the profitability of that machine.
Huge cash cow.
Oh yeah, it's a wonderful business. TurboTax, all that sort of stuff. So wonderful business. Check it out. Okay, so I would highly encourage everyone to check out the PocketSmith platform. There's a link in the show notes. We will do a bit of a live show on this in the coming months, so check it out where we walk through it. I'd love to know what everyone thinks because it's always interesting for me when I chat with people like you. Obviously, probably thousands of our listeners already use the platform, but there'll be heaps that are still yet to expose themselves to it, which would be wonderful. I've got two questions in closing. The first would be, if you could go back in time and change one thing, either about PocketSmith or something that you did, like a decision that you made, what would it be?
To change one thing? I would probably go back and tell myself to be just a bit more confident and to know that some really good things are coming. If I had a time machine, I'd say to myself, hey, you're going to have a great team, you're going to have an amazing product and some really fantastic customers because the road's going to be long, but it's going to be worth it. So I tell myself that. In terms of the product and the company, I feel strongly that we walked the road that we had to walk and that we've battle tested our business model and our culture, and we continue to do that every day. Certainly as a product-led founder, I look at our product and I see so many things that we would like to do better. My co-founder James and I are looking at our forecasting feature in particular right now, and we've got some really exciting stuff to come. And that's one thing that I know I speak for him when I say that I wish we could go back and maybe make that part of the product a little bit more fun to use, because we could have really helped a lot more people in the time. But we're solving that right now as we speak. So I can't wait to show our customers this new stuff.
No time like the present.
Yes.
Final question, and it's something that I ask everyone that appears on the show, which is that if you could go back and tell yourself one thing about money, about finance or in business or investing, like something not necessarily PocketSmith related, could be though, but just generally, what would it be?
I think I'd say to myself to take a bet on myself a bit sooner. I worked my first job as a web developer, software engineer, software designer, and then effectively I ended up running this company. But it took me 8 years. And, looking back, I lived somebody else's dream and I was passionate about it and I had a really good team there as well. But had I known how cool it would be to build something of my own, I would have started earlier.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I would go back and change perhaps.
Doesn't matter if you're talking about business, about finance, about money, about anything, going back and starting earlier is one of the tried and tested pieces of advice that we get on this show.
Right.
So, mate, I really do appreciate taking some time out of your schedule while you're here in Oz and in Sydney. I'm glad we could connect. So
thanks for having us here. And I'm so glad that our schedules worked out, that we could be in the same room together.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.